Hello and happy Friday, and thanks for tuning into Radio Free Rhinecliff.org. And this show in particular, correct me if I'm Norm, I'm your host, Norm, broadcasting from 41 degrees, 55 minutes, 10.8 seconds north, 73 degrees, 57 minutes, 4.5 seconds west. Also known as the fabulous Epicurean Corner Store in Rhinecliff, New York. I'm thrilled to be here tonight with Eric Riback.
Hey, Norm.
Hi, Eric. How you doing?
Starting right off with a map reference.
Right off. Did you recognize the coordinates?
No. I mean, I knew what they were.
Yeah, because you have your coordinates on like Facebook or Instagram or
Do I?
You do. You do. You want me to read them out?
Then people would know exactly where I live. I should take those off.
I looked them up. I'm like, oh, he lives at Gary's Deli, where, pretty easy to get a sandwich.
That I used to live by Gary's Deli.
Wow.
So that's an outdated reference.
Stolen coordinates?
When I first moved to this area about 15 years ago, we lived on a little cul-de-sac right behind Gary's Deli.
Uh-huh.
And so, but don't live there now.
Oh, well, you need to update your coordinates.
Or not.
And why, tell people who are just tuning in, who don't know, why are we discussing map coordinates?
I've been in the map publishing business, printed maps, for 45 years.
Right. And how's that going?
For me, it's going great. And it's because I've always been involved in special interest maps. So if I'd been in a road map or street map business, I would be doing something else now. But I've been lucky and worked for different companies and then had my own that are involved with various different special interest maps. And there's still a place for kind of boutique map publishing.
And what are examples of special interest maps?
So the first company I worked for, this was in Maine, published big atlases, like road atlas-sized atlases, except they were of individual states, showing all the back roads and all the recreational opportunities.
Right. They used to have like a Rand McNally sort of
That's
big.
That form factor, but a completely different kind of product. It was called the Atlas and Gazetteer, and it was a very popular series, still in print. I worked for National Geographic, and we published the famous wall maps, and also they have a big program of trail maps. So trail maps, recreational maps still sell, especially because even though you've got all these great things on devices, you go into the woods, you might want to have something that's not going to fail.
Right.
And then the maps that I'm involved with now, I have two companies, one that I own with my wife, and we publish maps of lighthouses primarily.
Wow.
Which are almost like guidebooks, and also some railroad stuff, some American history stuff. And then I run another company that I don't own that is involved with maps primarily for diving and snorkeling, with little pictures of the fish that you'll see when you're underwater.
I love that. And you brought one of them here tonight. It's really nice.
Yeah.
Are you a diver or a snorkeling enthusiast?
I'm not a diver. I've snorkeled a couple of times, but it's been many years. I'd like to go to the Caribbean, but I haven't been in many years and see some of those fish. Yeah.
And I'm looking at this fish one, and it's laminated. So is it waterproof?
It is. It's actually printed on a waterproof paper and then laminated because, as you see, it's cut to the edge and has a hole. So the printed thing between the lamination has to also be waterproof.
Right.
And the little hole punch is some people will put a lanyard on and literally take it underwater.
Yeah, sure. Chain it to their suit or their wrist or whatever.
Yeah.
Huh. And so how did you get into that? It's an interesting, unusual field to be in.
Totally unexpected. So starting at the age of 12, after I met a certain friend in junior high school.
And where were you at 12?
This was in the Bronx.
Okay.
Grew up in the Bronx. Creston Junior High School, all boys, segregated girl and boys junior highs at that time,
right.
No longer.
And some of those old buildings had doors that said girls on one door and boys on the other.
Separate buildings.
Yeah.
It's totally separate schools. I met a guy named Barry Pretzel, his real name, and he somehow had decided that he liked radio. And he got me interested in radio. We had a make-believe radio station. And my career ambition from that point right through college was to be a disc jockey.
Right. Wait, a little back up. What is a make-believe radio station like? Did you have make-believe call letters?
Oh, yes. We did. We had a program schedule, and I had a reel-to-reel recorder, and we had turntables and the equipment that he bought down on Canal Street, and we would produce radio programs, tape them for our own enjoyment.
And how long were these programs?
I don't know, an hour. Mostly disc jockey programs, but then we also did radio plays that we wrote and acted in.
And are any of the old reel-to-reels of this still in existence?
No, none of that. None of that. Yeah.
Too bad. And so I'm guessing you had a turntable of some sort if you were playing music on your
couple
station.
A couple of them, and the kind that you could cue up a record on, not your home turntable. Stuff he bought down on Canal Street.
I love that.
Yeah.
And so before we proceed, Canal Street was just the place for all that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But it's kind of a hike from the Bronx.
Well, yes. But we went downtown a lot, and there was one particular, on school breaks, and there was one summer when we were 15 where we went downtown every day, and we would just decide where we were going to go. We went to a lot of TV show tapings.
Oh, wow.
So, game shows, and I had a lot of Match Game and those kinds of things. But then sometimes we go down to Canal Street.
Would you take like the 1, 2, or 3 train? What train went from where you were?
Well, it would either been the D train or the 4. But by that time, he had moved out to Co-op City. He would take the bus to me, and then we would go downtown together.
And you said you went to like tapings. Were they just open to the public?
Yeah, you had to get a ticket, but you showed up at NBC at 9 in the morning, and then they would say, well, we're doing the Match Game, we're doing Jeopardy, and you get a couple of tickets and come back later that afternoon.
Oh my goodness. So this is in the 60s?
Yeah, so that would have been 68.
And there was still a lot of TV production
A lot
in
in New York. Yeah, even went to the Tonight Show once while I was still in New York.
Wow.
But that was because that was a year later when I had a girlfriend who was Johnny Carson's dry cleaner.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
Wow. So what were some of the highlights of the things that you saw? Was it Gene Rayburn who
Gene Rayburn. So well, there were a couple of things, and one is pretty off color. Should I tell it?
Yeah, it's cable radio.
So typically, these shows, they record beginning to end, right? There are no edits, nothing.
Yeah.
And so one time we were doing Jeopardy, and the category was fairy tales. And the answer was they went into the woods looking for faggots, Faggots, which means bundles of wood.
Right.
Which is why the Brits call their cigarettes fags.
Right.
And the audience broke up laughing. They had to stop tape and change the answer and come up with something else.
Oh, that's funny. What a crazy thing. So I'm guessing it wasn't in wide use at that point as a pejorative.
It was, which is why everybody was laughing.
Okay.
I don't understand why the people writing that show didn't know not to use that word.
How the censors let that get passed.
You would have thought.
They were notoriously strict.
Yeah.
Well, that's fun. And so how many of these shows do you reckon you saw throughout your youth?
Oh, dozens.
What a blast. What a fabulous thing to do.
Yeah.
And do you remember who the guests were on Carson?
No.
I loved Carson so much.
I have no memory of who was on.
Yeah, I know. It's like quite a while ago.
Yeah.
All right. So back to you were answering the question how you got into the map stuff. Yeah.
So career ambition, be a disc jockey. Went to college. I really should have gone to a school that had a radio major, but I didn't want to leave New York. So I ended up in NYU. To do TV, but didn't really like TV. So I want to be a disc jockey, don't get to be a disc jockey. Eventually, I got into another part of radio, another aspect of it, moved to Maine, and I was selling radio ads.
Okay.
And I met a guy who had started a map company, and I sold him some ads, and he thought I was a good salesman. In fact, he was an easy sell.
Okay.
He offered me a job. I was not doing very well at selling radio ads. We had a toddler at home, and my wife, and this was really not the way she would normally be, but basically, I didn't want to take the job because I wanted to be in radio.
Right.
And she kicked my ass and said, baby needs a new pair of shoes. You
Right.
need to take this better job. And it's the best thing that ever happened.
Which was the sales job.
Selling maps. Yep.
And you said you weren't such a good salesman. Did you?
I wasn't such a good salesman of advertising.
I see.
There's a big difference between selling a service, especially one that nobody wants to buy. Nobody wants to buy advertising.
Right.
And even when they buy it, they don't want to pay for it. And some people are really good at it. I'm not a closer type guy, but you give me a good product, I can identify the right customers, and I was very successful.
And what kinds of maps were the first that you were selling?
It was like that atlas I described.
Okay.
We also had some sheet maps of different parts. This was up in Maine, so we had a map of Moosehead Lake and Sebago Lake and the Allagash and Baxter State Park. These were fold-out recreational maps.
Right.
Yeah. And so we sold them at country stores, which back then, before everything was a chain, there were a lot of local little country stores and
Right.
sporting goods stores, hunting, fishing, those kinds of places.
That's funny.
LL Bean, sold a lot to LL Bean.
Right. Yeah, I used to have, like a dozen maps in sort of the map pocket on the door of my car.
Yeah.
And now all of them are, just unnecessary. At MapQuest, Google Maps or Apple Maps or
Yeah.
whatever.
It's mostly what I use in the car. We still do carry one road atlas as kind of an emergency. And there's an atlas no longer published that was one of the great pieces of published cartography, an atlas of the Hudson Valley that was published by a defunct company called Jamapco out of Albany.
They made all of the county maps.
They were the kind of the local regional map maker for this area.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful atlas. It's out of date, but we keep it in the car just in case.
The Jamapco
Jim,
Atlas.
there's that guy named Jim.
There you go. I don't think I ever even considered that. And that was the Hudson Valley region or New York State?
This particular one was an atlas of the entire Hudson Valley. They did a lot of localized things. They did, all kinds of things.
And do you have a facility for refolding maps after they've been completely opened?
I'm pretty good at it, yeah.
And how's the missus?
I don't think we've tested her on folding maps.
Yeah. All right, good. I thought maybe we could start a fight there. It's it's the cliche is that in every marriage, one person is good at folding the map, the other person is not.
I don't know that I was good at it before I worked in the business. I can't remember. I did use maps, but yes, once you've worked with them a lot, you learn how to refold them.
Right. So back to NYU for a second. How you said that you didn't get to be a DJ. Did you get to do that at all, and it didn't work out? Or
eventually, I did a little bit. Of course, in college, I was very involved with the radio station. I became the program director. I did shows, so I did a lot of that.
WNYU.
WNYU, and I was there when we first went on the air. We had been just like a carrier current station before that you could hear in the dormitories, but we put the FM station on the air while I was going there. And so I did a lot of shows there. And but after that, I got a job out of college working for a radio syndication firm that had a program called News Blimps. A friend of mine had been the producer and got me a job there doing sales. And I did some production, some work. And these were little news features that ran on progressive rock stations. And so I did that for a couple of years. And then when we wanted to leave New York, and we decided to live in Maine, I just went out and tried to find a job as a disc jockey or a salesman.
Right.
I got a sales job.
And you said we. Who was the we that moved from New York to Maine?
This was my first wife, Barbara, who I'm still close with. We were married for 21 years.
Wow.
And she still lives in Maine. And
Nice.
and we left because it was 19 1977, she was pregnant, and New York in 1977, we said, we're not raising a child in this city.
Right.
And we had car camped in New England a lot, liked it, so we decided to try to find a job in New England.
And you did.
And I did. And so I got a sales job, and I did do some disc jockeying on weekends. I got part-time jobs doing that. So I did get to a little bit fulfill my life's ambition and be a rock and roll DJ in Maine for a couple of years.
Oh, that sounds fun.
It was a lot of fun.
Can you do a little like FM DJ voice for us?
You know, it's funny. I used to have a wonderful FM voice. And as I've gotten older, my voice has gotten a little reedier, a little thinner, but I could really put it on. I don't think I can anymore.
I love that. And did you have DJ role models? You know, like Cousin Brucey or Wolfman Jack or, Casey Kasem? Or...
Well, I loved some of the DJs that I grew up listening to, the top 40 guys, but I was never going to be a top 40 guy. So Cousin Brucey, who I met a couple of times, a wonderful guy, best disc jockey in the United States was a guy named Dan Ingram. Used to be on WABC in the afternoons. Dan Ingram. And one time I got to spend an hour in the studio watching him perform. It was amazing. And it was because I was doing a term paper on radio, and I got to interview the program director of WABC and talked him into letting me in the studio. And he said, you can be there for 5 minutes and I'm going to come and get you. And he forgot about me for an hour.
What a treat that must have been.
It was
stars in your eyes?
Yeah, and just watching a great performer work.
Right.
The way he would signal the engineer, because back then you had engineers, you didn't run your own board. To the timing of when they'd start the records and him talking up the intros,
right?
Which nobody has ever been better than him at that.
I love that. And do you still listen to radio like that? Do you have a favorite DJ now?
I don't listen to terrestrial radio at all. Right. The only radio I listen to is I do listen to Sirius. There are no announcers that I'm really fond of there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. All right. So when we left off in Maine, I wanted to ask this. Were there any like special libations that you enjoyed when you were living in Maine?
Not while I lived there. What I've brought is something that was invented or discovered after I lived there, but I still go to Maine often.
Okay.
So
what do you brought a cocktail?
Yeah. Should I
mixed drink? Yeah. I think
start preparing.
It's 5:18.
Okay.
And so what is this called?
This is called a burnt trailer, which, if you know anything about Maine, is like a perfect name for this drink. And it was invented by a restaurant called the Great Lost Bear. Uh-huh. And I'm going to measure it out.
All right.
I'm going to measure it out.
And what is this that you're measuring first?
So this is Allen's coffee flavored brandy.
A half a cup of coffee flavored brandy.
Which until a third. That's right.
All right.
Until fairly recently was the most popular liquor in the state of Maine because they have a lot of long, cold nights.
All right. Our fact checkers are going to look into that and get back to you.
Gonna get some ice now.
Okay. So first goes in the Allen's coffee flavored brandy. This very popular favorite derives its character from natural flavor.
It's 60 proof.
Oh yeah, there you go.
It packs a punch. So
30% alcohol by volume.
So alcohol and caffeine.
Oh, that's good.
Of that.
Yeah.
And the other ingredient,
like a speedball,
is something that's also not found very much outside of Maine and Massachusetts. It's a soda called Moxie.
This is the other ingredient. Is a soda called Moxie. Oh, look at you. A radio pro opening that right next to the microphone.
And so it's...
And a third a cup of that.
No. We're going to...
2/3.
2/3. And I'm dripping on the console here, but...
yeah.
And we may have to open another can. I think we will.
All right.
So
who's having this, Matt?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And
burnt trailer.
So, around here, there are mobile home parks, but very few people from my observation, live in mobile homes that aren't part of a park. But in Maine, and I'm stirring with my swizzle stick from my late father's collection.
Nice.
From the Playboy Club. This was yours.
Thank you. I just had a sip of the Moxie. That is interesting
cheers.
too. Cheers. Thank you
for
so much.
having me.
Cheers, cheers,
Thank
cheers.
you, Matt. Thank you, Jen.
I'm not going to sleep tonight if there's real caffeine in here.
Moxie is very herbal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy. What a crazy, wonderful drink.
I learned about this drink years before I had it. And I go to this restaurant every few years when I'm in Portland. And I was just afraid to order it because it sounded terrible.
Yeah.
And so I finally ordered it, and I told the server, I'm a little scared right now. And he said, no, you'll be surprised. And I was. I love this drink.
Love that. Well, cheers again. Thanks for bringing it.
Thanks.
And thanks for coming in. Wow. Moxie and Allen's Coffee Brandy. Yeah. So you didn't discover this when you were living in Maine?
No.
Right.
Oh, and I was going to say about trailers. So a lot of people in rural Maine live in mobile homes.
Uh-huh.
And amazingly, my daughter, who had lived out west for 20 years, came back to Maine 3 years ago and lives in a trailer on an acre in rural Maine.
Wow.
Yeah, it's great.
Huh. I was not aware that that was a thing in rural Maine.
It really is.
Right.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Oh, hello. And so what does she do? She came back from out west where?
She was in Eugene, Oregon.
Okay.
Which she loved for many years.
Right.
But over time, changes in the city and changes in the climate. So Eugene is west of the national forests, which basically every year are on fire for 2 or 3 months.
Okay.
And so there's this smoke season in Eugene.
Okay.
And she just couldn't take it anymore.
Right.
And one day she remembered that she really loved where she grew up in this little town in Maine called Gray.
Uh-huh.
And she decided she wanted to move back to that kind of situation.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's nice. And you have another child as well.
And so I have a stepson with my second wife who I've raised since he was 6, and today he's 36, his birthday.
Wow, that's good.
Yeah.
So you've 21 years with the first wife.
Yep.
And one child.
Yep.
And 30 years, I guess, if my math's right.
That's
with the second wife.
Yeah, 29 married and about 30 years together. Yeah.
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 That's pretty good numbers.
Yeah, I'm a marrying kind of guy, I guess. I had a 3-year interregnum. And I have to say about radio voice. So I had a girlfriend during that period for a couple of years. And back in the 90s, if you wanted, this is before smartphones and apps, if you wanted to meet people, you ran a personal ad in like the local alternative paper.
Right.
The ads were free. The way they made money is to respond to the ad, you called a 900 number.
Where was this?
This was in Portland, Maine.
Okay.
And so the caller paid, that 900 number cost money that then the newspaper would get revenue from.
Right.
And so I answered this ad. And
do you remember what she said?
Well, after we'd been going out for a while, I can't remember the first meeting, I said, what about my response made you want to meet me?
Right.
And she said, it was your voice.
So
I still had the radio voice.
I love that.
Yeah.
Huh. And but that didn't
didn't last. She's a lovely woman, but we weren't right for each other.
And how did you meet your current wife?
So she's a writer, and we were both at a trade conference for booksellers in Boston, and we were at a reception at the Fine Arts Museum, and I was talking to a friend, and she was trying to find publishers in Maine because she was looking for freelance work, and she saw my badge and introduced herself and said, can I buy you lunch sometime? And I said, sure, we're a map company. We don't have a lot of writing, but we have some. But sure, I'm happy to meet you. And so we had lunch. And then we had another lunch, and she asked me out, which, let me tell you, that was amazing. And I said, oh, but I have a girlfriend. And she said, if that ever changes, let me know. And in the ensuing year, we became friends.
Right.
We both were ended up going through most of 95, a really hard year for different reasons, and ended up becoming good friends and kind of supporting each other through those times.
And where was she living?
And she was living in a town called Yarmouth near Portland.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Huh. And so how long did it take before you were free? Before it fell apart with the ex-girlfriend?
About 10 months, really. And it was the first, I was going through, I've always been pretty confident and known what I wanted, but what had happened that year had thrown me into such a tizzy, which is also why that relationship was going south, because I was no longer the happy, confident, and guy who could afford good dinners that girlfriend was enjoying.
Yeah.
It shows how kind of surface our relationship was. So there was affection there, but it wasn't that deep.
And what happened to your happiness and confidence? Why did it wane?
That company that I mentioned after 15 years fired me, and it was the right decision. I was no longer happy there. The company had grown a lot and changed a lot. I was no longer happy there, but I wasn't going to leave, so they made that decision. And then 2 weeks after that, my sister, who was about 12 years older than me, died suddenly.
Oof.
Yeah. So it was just like two gut punches in a row.
Right.
And it totally threw me into a tizzy, and it actually was the one and only time in my life. He eventually sent me to therapy, which was really helpful.
Right.
And when I came out of that therapy, or when I thought I was done, I realized that I was in love with Bella.
That's so wonderful.
And I told her, and she was shocked. And we were like an immediate couple.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Why was she shocked?
Well, I think she kind of knew, though I hadn't really told her a lot about what was going on with the other relationship, but she kind of knew that things weren't good with that. But, she'd asked me out, and I never really expressed that kind of feeling about her.
Right.
Yeah.
And so right away, it was like love. You were a couple.
Yeah.
And did you stick around Maine?
So that was the problem, because she had already decided to leave Maine, a place that I loved.
Oh, just when you're like, okay, I'm free now.
And my daughter, she was just out of the house. She was just about 18, but I didn't want to leave her. I loved Maine, never would have left. And she had decided that Maine wasn't for her, and she was moving to Charlottesville, Virginia.
She didn't like the winters?
There were various things about Maine. The coastal climate wasn't good for her health.
Right.
And she just she just didn't jibe with the people there so much.
Okay.
She moved there because her parents had moved there, and she wanted to be near them with a little kid after her divorce. Jesse was 3 when she moved there, and now he was 6. And she had fallen in love with Charlottesville, and she said, I'm just going to move there. And so I had to make a decision. So I went, because I knew that if I didn't go, this thing wouldn't happen.
Right. I mean, it's the best reason to move somewhere is for love.
Yeah. Yeah. Worked out.
and so now you're in Charlottesville.
Yep.
What kind of work did you find down there?
So I, through this time had been trying to find work in the map industry because I liked it, and that's kind of what I knew.
Right.
And it was a bigger industry then. This is 95. There were more companies and so on. I'd been doing some freelancing, and I'd started doing a lot of work for a company in Lancaster, Pennsylvania called Geosystems. You would have heard of that company after they changed their name to MapQuest.
Oh, wow.
And so I had a contract with them. So I was it didn't matter where I was at that time. I was kind of working half-time for them. And that eventually turned into a job after we moved to Charlottesville. They wanted me to move to Lancaster, came close to doing it. And fortunately, we came close to even buying a house there. And at some point, Bella said, "This isn't our place. I ain't going." Wow. And so I told them, "Sorry, I can't move. I'll come, I'll commute, whatever." And so I became what we now know as a hybrid employee, where I worked from home Mondays and Fridays. Tuesday morning, I drove 5 hours up to Lancaster, spent a couple of nights up there in a motel,
right,
and came back Thursday night.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how did you like that?
Oh, that arrangement, didn't like it at all, but it was a good job.
Right.
And there was really nothing else to do, and I liked the job.
Right.
But it was a compromise, and it was very hard on Bella because, for half the work week, she was kind of like a single mom again.
Right.
Yeah. It was tough.
So how did you get out of that?
By getting laid off a few years later. So, and even though that company was called MapQuest, I was involved with paper map publishing.
Okay.
I'd helped us. The reason I came aboard was I helped them do a deal with National Geographic to publish new products under their brand, road atlases and such, and distribute them to the retail market, which they had never done. And so I was involved with paper map publishing. And this was before there was a MapQuest website.
Right.
And once they launched that, that's all that company was interested in.
Right.
And they launched MapQuest, sold it to AOL. AOL merged with Time Warner. That's the day I got laid off.
Right.
And again, I've been so fortunate. So, I wasn't at work that day. It was one of the days I was home. But I knew that this might happen. I didn't know whether I'd be on the layoff list. And I get a call from my boss's boss. And he starts reading the script.
Oh, geez.
And I said, "Bob, I don't need the script. What's the package?"
Right.
Good package. Got a good package.
Nice.
Layoff, the severance and so on. Plus, they asked me to stay for a few months to close down the division. And if I stayed, I'd get a bonus. Plus, I got commissioned on selling the stuff that was in the warehouse. It was the best thing, but it actually was the second best thing. 5 minutes after that call, I got a call from the president of National Geographic Maps, who was an old friend in the business. And he said, "I know things are happening today. I don't know if it affects you, but if it does, I have a job in mind for you."
Amazing.
I had a job offer 5 minutes after I lost my
That's
job.
spectacular.
Yeah.
And could you do that from home as a hybrid employee? Or
Originally, I was, and it worked out really well because the initial job I had for them, the maps division, was out in Colorado.
Oh, are they in DC?
Well, the National Geographic is almost all of it was in DC.
Okay.
The maps division as a commercial enterprise was based in Colorado because they had bought this hiking map company. And my boss was the guy who had owned that hiking map company and sold it to National Geographic. But my job was to be the liaison with the home crew, with all the other divisions of National Geographic.
Right.
So every week I spent a day or two in Washington, which was very easy to get to from Charlottesville, a couple hours. And it was wonderful. I got to be in National Geographic, meetings in the old boardroom with pictures of the founders above you.
Right.
It was super cool.
But also their maps. I mean, we always got Nat Geo when I was a kid, and always looked forward to the maps. They were so cool and so romantic.
Yeah. And it's sad that they don't make maps like that anymore, but they did still then. And so my job was to work with other divisions who needed maps, work with the international partners that they started to have, because the magazine was published by publishers in 20 different countries. So I would do deals with them, and it was a wonderful job. Eventually, after a few years, I got promoted to be the head of sales for the whole division, which was based in Colorado. And I wasn't made to move, but I felt it would be better if I was out there. And at that point, my family was actually, I think, at least my wife, I think, was a little tired of Charlottesville after 10 years. We liked it a lot, but it was very insular, we found. And so she said, yeah, let's move to Denver. So
wow.
We moved to Denver.
How'd you like that?
I loved Denver. My wife hated it.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Let me ask, because I just traveled to a couple of high altitude cities, and it took me a couple of days to sort of acclimate to the altitude.
Yeah.
Was there a problem, sort of like
a little bit at first, not for me, not for the 5,000 feet of Denver, and understand for various reasons. I've been out there a lot on business, like because, as I said, I had a relationship with National Geographic.
Right.
I had been out there a lot. 5,000 feet wasn't a problem, but the office was in the foothills at 8,000 feet. And again, once I lived at 5,000, I had no problem with 8,000. But before I lived there, every time I went to that office, I got a headache.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's serious stuff. I'd never really thought about it until.
Yeah. But my daily commute for 4.5 years was driving up the hill, as they like to say, to the office. Yeah.
Right. What fun. So how long did it last in Denver?
Yeah, just 4.5 years.
Okay.
And then it was 2009. I got laid off.
Yes.
Yeah.
Here's the thing I love so much is like this is the 5th or 6th or 10th layoff in the last half an hour of us talking, and you described yourself as the luckiest guy. I
am, but understand, I went from 1980 to 2009 with a couple little interruptions. I had just 3 jobs.
Okay.
I mean, I had long tenures. I had 15 years, 4 or 5 years, 8 years.
Right. But I mean, people could look at those layoffs and say, look, there's nothing but bad luck. But you have a positive spin on it all.
Well,
or just a positive outlook.
I wasn't super positive after that one because at this point I'm in my mid-50s in an industry that has shrunk to nothing. The only thing I'd worked in for years.
The printed map industry.
Yeah. I was really worried about that.
Okay.
And my Bella was unhappy with Denver, and we had already decided that this here, Rhinebeck, was going to be our next place.
How had you decided that?
We had vacationed here the year before. Bella knew the Mid-Hudson some. I didn't.
Uh-huh.
We'd stayed at a B&B in Saugerties, had lunch at Calico.
Okay, I remember
which was
Calico
a little
here.
Cute French restaurant that's now the Puerto Rican Cafe.
Yeah.
Just loved it. And I said, yeah, this would be a good place to retire to in 10 or 15 years.
Right.
And so that was the year before. And the day I got laid off, she was actually here visiting a friend.
In Rhinebeck.
Hurley, but yeah.
Right.
And so I called her and said, oh, I'd just been texted. She said, we're moving.
Wow.
And I said, no. I said, we're living in Denver, a big market. I should try to find a job.
Right.
So I spent half a year trying to find a job without any luck. And at that point, we said, let's just move to where we want to be.
And well, good luck finding a job in that field here in Rhinebeck.
Right. So what had happened previous to this layoff is we had bought this little map company that did lighthouse maps that was really there to be my retirement hobby. But it happened because when we were here in Rhinebeck on that vacation, Bella asked me what my dream was. My dream was to own my own publishing company.
Right.
And she encouraged me to do something about that.
And so you bought this company.
Yeah.
Bellaterra?
Well, it wasn't called that. It's called Bellaterra because we named it after, she named it, her name is Bella.
Right, and Terra for like
Earth.
land. And
means beautiful earth. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm holding in my hand Maine lighthouses, illustrated map again. How many lighthouses can there be? I mean, a map company that specializes in lighthouse seems pretty limited.
Well, it's very specialized. There are about 800 lighthouses in the country.
Wow.
There are about 65 in Maine. The key, this is really what I've learned, very much a museum store business. So we sell to lighthouses that have little museums and gift shops.
Okay.
And the guy who started it had a broader clientele. There was more interest in lighthouses back 30 years ago than there is now. And so he could sell to coastal gift shops that weren't lighthouse specific. But there's a little less interest. So we're very much selling to the specialized places.
Right.
And so, for instance, in this area, Saugerties Lighthouse has a little gift shop. We sell to Saugerties Lighthouse.
Right. There's a lighthouse just across the river here in Kingston.
There is. I was just looking at it before I came over here.
Yeah. And prior to buying this company, did you have any special affinity for lighthouses?
No. I mean, I liked them, but it wasn't like I was a lighthouse guy.
Right.
But I liked them. And so, but this company was never meant to be how we would earn a living. So after I came here, I tried doing anything else. I had another job for a map company that lasted 6 months and was a horrifically bad job. Got done with that. Tried selling insurance for a year. Services, not good at that.
That's funny.
And at some point, and Bella wasn't that involved with this business. She was a little bit. At some point, two friends from two different worlds told us, you need to commit to this thing. And so we both went all in.
What were the two different worlds they were from?
One was a friend who's a literary agent, friend of Bella's, and one was a financial advisor that I'd met in a networking group, a guy named Mike Bautista, who was a wonderful man. He said, I don't care if you have money to invest or not. If you want me to see what your financial situation is and give you advice, I will. And we had him over because we don't have any money. We were broke then. And that was his advice. He said, you need to measure your time, know what you're doing, and commit to this business.
And so you're freshly committed to this business.
Went all in.
What does that mean? What'd you do?
It meant, for me, doing a lot more effort on sales, finding customers, developing new products to grow the business. And for Bella, figuring out what to do with this art, because our maps had illustrations, little watercolor paintings. She figured out how to create a print-on-demand art business, which we're now as much an art business as a map business, prints, note cards.
Wow. And
so we did all of that. And now we're not rich, but we earn a nice living doing it.
Right. Oh, that's great. Well, hats off to you. So Bellaterra is one of the map companies. What's the other one called?
The other one is called Franco, with a K, not to be confused with the former dictator of Spain. It was started by a guy named Frank Nielsen, who was an entrepreneur, cartographer, designer, and he started the company and then took in outside investors, including the guy who's now my boss, who lives in Hawaii. And the problem was, after a while, Frank didn't realize that he no longer owned the company by himself, that he was a minority owner. And the way he acted, it just didn't jibe. So they fired him. And I'd become not friendly with, but kind of knew them a little bit. And they offered to have me run the company. So that was 2012. So I've been running that as my side gig, which I had the capacity for and needed the money for, and I love the product. So it's been really nice.
Yeah, they're gorgeous. This one laminated thing of the fishes.
Yeah.
Of the Hawaiian Islands.
Fish identification cards. We do them for Hawaii is our biggest market, but the Caribbean, the Pacific, Florida, California.
And where do people buy those?
In Hawaii, we're sold largely in souvenir shops or in the souvenir department of Walmart.
Right.
And also in dive shops.
Okay.
Around the country, some dive shops, a lot online. And in various places, we sell in souvenir shops. It kind of all depends from market to market.
Right.
Yeah. Huh. But we sell online a lot.
Right. So you've got all these jobs, and you're also the head of PANDA, which is our local TV station.
That's right. So, as I mentioned, I majored in television.
Right.
Never went into the business. But when I lived in Maine, they were starting a public access station. And this is something that any town or city can have. They don't have to have them. But until recently, it was just a channel on cable TV that if a municipality wanted to put one up, the cable company had to put it on their system.
Right.
And stations like ours are what are called PEG, Public Educational Government. In bigger cities that might have 3 separate stations. And so I got involved with that in the little town I lived in Maine. And after I moved here at some point, they were looking for people for the board of PANDA, which has been around for 30 years.
Is that an acronym?
Yes, thanks for asking. PANDA is Public Access Northern Dutchess Area. And Matty did some technical work for PANDA many years ago.
Rosenberg.
Matt Rosenberg and Jonathan Burkhart, who you know, worked for us, and various other local people years ago. I got involved about 9 years ago, went to some meetings, and then got put on the board. And at my first meeting of the board, the chair resigned, and they made me the chair. I went, oh. And so I've been the chair for about 8.5 years.
Wow. Well, God bless you.
Yeah.
For doing that.
And, I enjoy it. And so we're known mostly for having government meetings, but what I'm working on is getting a lot more other content. We used to have, any resident of Rhinebeck, Red Hook, or Tivoli can put their own programming on our channel. And I would invite people to do that. My email address and our station manager's email address is on our website at pandatv.org. But not too many people are using us that way, so I'm trying to create a lot more programming.
So how many hours of programming do you have every day?
As many as we can fill. Right. So, it's mostly programming in the evenings with a lot of repetition. That we'll run the meetings many times. Right. But what's become really important as cable subscribers are dropping away is that we now can be viewed other ways. So we've had a YouTube channel for many years. Okay. But also a little over a year ago, we were able to get new technology and have an app for iPhones and Roku and Apple TV and Fire TV.
And so I could go to the App Store and download the PANDA
and
app.
It's called PANDA Now. You can get this app. It has what they call the linear station, which is the old-fashioned station where one show after another. Right. But it has an on-demand menu, kind of like Netflix.
Well, that had to have been a huge undertaking to get that up.
The app, well, it really all depended on us getting new technology in. Because literally until a year and a half ago, we were still using the same server that Matty installed 15 years ago that eventually died. Right. So we were able to get funding for new technology. And along with that actually came this app. Our technology provider had an app, and we just had to put our name on it.
So sweet. So who watches PANDA?
I don't know. I mean, we know people watch.
Nielsen doesn't
but
track
we really
up.
Don't know who's watching. Yeah. And of course, on the cable, we get no information on how many people are watching. On YouTube and...
Can that be rectified? I mean,
No, they're not going to tell. The cable company hates public access.
Right.
They wish they didn't have to put us on.
Right.
They dislike us.
But certainly they have the numbers, but they won't share them with you.
They may have the numbers, but they I don't even ask. They won't share. But on YouTube and the app, we can see it. And of course the challenge is that because we're known mostly for meetings, which are a public service but don't have a high viewership, what I've really been trying to do is create more programming to give more people reasons to watch us.
And what are your dreams for programming?
Well, one thing that I've started doing is I worked out a situation with Oblong Books where we're recording when, they have typically 2 authors a week coming there presenting their books. And so we're recording not all of them, but many of them and putting them on.
Oh, sweet.
So I think that's interesting to people who are interested in books.
Right.
We are doing all the historical talks. So the Rhinebeck Historical Society, David Miller records his own presentations and gives them to us. And so we've been running those, but I've started recording all the historical talks from Historic Red Hook and our county historian. Did you know we have a county historian?
I do.
Named Will Tatum. He's a great presenter. I record all of his talks, put them on. And we do other community events. I'm going to I'm going to tape one of the Memorial Day parades this week, and we do all the fairs and festivals.
You said you're going to tape this. You're actually going to be there with the camera.
This year I'm going to do Red Hook. Last year I was going to do Rhinebeck, and they canceled it because of weather.
Right.
This year I'll do Red Hook. Next year I'll do Rhinebeck. Maybe if we can get other people, we'll do them both. But I'm trying to do as many of the community events and fairs and festivals as we can.
Right.
And in the past we've done a lot of those. In the past we did Sinterklaas when that was happening.
Oh, what fun!
Yeah. So I just did a recording at the Apple Blossom Fair, and
in Red Hook there.
And we're going to have a show of that up. So trying to do as much community-minded programming as we can.
And what percentage of your viewership is sort of like just tuning in on cable or watching on demand on?
Yeah, I don't really have a sense of that. I mean, I'll tell you that while we can get the statistics, I don't worry about that a lot. I know that we've had as of a year ago, 1,500 downloads of the app. So at least that many people have decided to put the app on devices, which for an area this size, I think is pretty good.
Right.
I think my goal is just to provide as much programming that people might be interested in, let people know about it.
Right.
And try to build whatever viewership we're meant to have.
And do you do any news stuff? I mean, I'm just thinking about like working with the Daily Catch, or because here at this station we work with the Daily Catch.
And we're talking about cooperation such as that. Right now we don't have like hard news, but I certainly have ideas for kind of public interest programs. Right now, if I could find more people who are interested in doing that, and this is a call to action, my email address is on the website, pandatv.org. I'd love to have people producing more programming.
How big's the staff?
The staff is 2/3 of one person.
That person is?
Her name is Danielle Chandler. She's been with us for at least a dozen years. She's fantastic.
That's the paid staff, I assume.
That's
right.
paid.
Is there volunteer staff as well?
Right now, I'm the volunteer staff.
Well,
so we need more people, and we also have videographers who get a stipend to record the government meetings.
Right.
Yeah.
Nice. So they go out there. They get paid by the hour, I'm guessing.
They get a fee for each meeting. Yep.
Right.
And they do all of the town board and trustee meetings, and then some of the other boards, such as the planning boards. It's up to them if they want their meetings recorded.
Right.
Yeah.
And do you do anything with like the local high school or the colleges? I mean,
I would love to be doing more. We've been trying to reach out to the schools, and frankly, haven't found the right connection there. But I'd love to have a connection with the schools. Right now, we don't have one.
Right.
So we have work to do. And the other thing I will say is, we could use new board members. We've got some folks who've been on for a very long time. They'll stay on as long as I need them, but they'd also be willing to make way for fresh blood. If somebody is interested in that, I would love to have that discussion.
Right. Yeah. Again, it's Panda. What's the URL?
Panda TV, PANDA.org.
And if anybody's interested in helping out,
contact me. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Huh. And so what is the best part of Panda for you, for your involvement?
Well, the part I love making TV shows.
Right.
And, for the longest time, I wasn't doing much of that. And I went through something in the last year thinking, I'm in my 70s now, and I need to work less, is what I was thinking.
Right.
And what I realized is, no, what I need to do is more stuff that's not work. So that's when I started the bookstore thing and doing the historical talks. And maybe I'll work less. I don't know.
I love how you define that stuff as not work.
That to me is fun.
That's so good.
I enjoy being behind a camera.
Right.
Yeah.
That's so good. Well, we're running out of time, but one of the things I wanted to hit on and ask about was this part of your bio. It says Eric Riback's grandparents were Russian revolutionaries, and his parents met at a communist youth league meeting.
You found my one time that I wrote a piece that was on HuffPost.
Oh, yeah.
Back in
right.
2008, when the Democratic Convention was coming to Denver.
Yeah.
That is true. And my parents, who are both deceased, did not like to talk about their past. And if I have any regret in life, I don't carry regrets. I wish I'd pushed them a little harder to talk about their past.
Right.
I do know that they met at a communist meeting. They were not communists. They were Kennedy liberals.
Sympathizers.
Kennedy liberals, at least at the time I was growing up.
Right.
But my father, before I was born, worked as a letter carrier for many years. And since after he died, I got his FBI file, and the FBI was interviewing his neighbors and his coworkers about him.
Wow.
Seeing what his sympathies were. I don't know if he ever knew that.
Right.
But I suspect that maybe he did, and maybe that's why he left the post office. And he ended up going into business for himself, which turned out to be a great thing.
Right.
He was a PR guy when I grew up.
Oh, funny.
Had a one-man PR shop, and I guess that led me into marketing.
Right, and sales.
And sales, yeah.
And mom?
Mom was a homemaker.
Right.
That was it.
That's great. And the Bronx?
The Bronx, I had a wonderful childhood in the Bronx, running around alleys and all of that, yeah.
Yeah. What a treat. Siblings?
So just the one sister who passed away, and she was 12 years older than me. She got married when I was 7. So we're almost like two only children. And we really weren't close until I got to be grown up, and then we were very close.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, she was wonderful.
I'm sorry for your
I
loss.
miss her terribly. Yeah.
Right. What was her name?
Linda.
Linda.
And she was the only one in the family that had a middle name. My parents didn't have a middle name. I don't have one. She had a middle name, Eve. No idea why.
Eve?
Eve.
Linda Eve Riback.
Yeah.
How sweet.
Yeah.
And you never got one. Did you ever think of just adopting a middle name?
Not really, but one time, 50 years ago, I responded to a mail order offer and gave myself a middle initial, and I still get mail to Eric N. Ryback.
I love that.
And it was a subscription to National Geographic magazine.
Fabulous magazine.
The end.
Yay.
I still get mail to Eric N. Ryback.
Perfect. That's a great place to end. Eric N. Ryback, thank you so much for being here tonight and talking with us.
Thank you.
Everybody, thanks for tuning in. Have a happy Friday and a fabulous weekend. Thanks to the Epicurean and to Jen and Matt, our fabulous producers here.